Flexible Philosophy Podcast, birthday edition.
Woohoo!
Star guest, Jennifer Bartley. Happy birthday.
Thank you. What an indulgent thing to do on your birthday. Talk for an hour and post it on the internet.
And now it's going to stand the test of time. It could be your birthday every day of the year, depending on how many listeners we get.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
anyways.
Hitting those stage of life eras where you just need to feel like you're making a mark on the world.
hmm Yeah.
Yeah.
So, how is birthday in the context of the cancer process?
Well, today's birthday was all wrapped up with cancer stuff because I had my last infusion of my induction treatment. So we're celebrating because I think that's a really cool thing that happened on my birthday.
hmm
Because it's good.
Yeah.
I finished like 4 months of treatments and now I get 3 weeks off and I'll go do it. The next thing is a stem cell transplant. But like it was a lot of like that era of that 4 months with like diagnosis and starting treatment and I had bumps in that road. And so like I'm celebrating everything that happened. Not
Yeah.
that it was all good, but that I survived it.
Yeah.
Like,
It's quite a milestone that
yeah.
at this time last year, you didn't know you're headed for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No idea.
Yep.
Not to give anyone out there anxiety, but yeah, just bumping along. But that's how life is, right? Like we just continue as normal, and then when things blindside us, then they do. And you
Yep.
figure it out.
Just recapitulate and continue on.
I think that that's one of the adaptive like beliefs about this is that like it's been, I mean, unthinkable that you would go through something like this, and it's like still here, still alive, still surviving. Like
Yeah.
the emotional parts of all of this is like, I guess you can still have a life even when something really terrible happens to you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
But, okay. Made it through. What else you got?
Exactly.
But please be gentle.
Please, agent. Yes, that's exactly right.
Yep.
Yeah, so
Well,
that's birthday update.
all right.
And now we're doing a like popcorn edition of
Yes.
this podcast. We have no idea what we're going to talk about. Could be anything.
I know what I'm going to talk about.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So I just watched this video of this guy who was critiquing Mark Driscoll because if you don't know who Mark Driscoll is, to our listeners, um, he pastored a church called Mars Hill out west. And I think it was in Portland, Oregon. And it was the playbook. Okay, we'll say that. It was just terrible interactions, terrible leadership, lots of harm. And they made a whole podcast called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill by Christianity Today, which is a really good podcast. Totally recommend it. It really puts into context religious trauma from a
Yeah.
relatable standpoint, and they have the victims' voices. But, anyways, he basically got kicked out of that community and got kicked out of the city. He ruined tons of people's careers. It was just like a terrible story. And then he up and moves to Arizona and opens a new church where tons of people have flocked to him. Despite all this information being out there,
Shocking.
yeah, despite websites being dedicated to Mark Driscoll's harm, he has accumulated tons of followers again. So, like,
Yeah.
charismatic leadership, charismatic personality traits, whatever it is so attractive to people, even though, like, logically, and even though the evidence points to ongoing harm. You're likely to get burnt if you're around this person based upon past behaviors. Yet people flock to him again.
All true. It would be like if Keith Raniere somehow got out of jail and like with all of the awareness out there about all the history of what he's done and then started up a new organization and people came to it and were like, "Hey, he probably was persecuted or he probably was wrongfully accused." And they believed his story, whatever lies he would tell, and they're like, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. He seems like a great guy." And then he redoes the same playbook.
Yeah, and he could, and
Yes,
people
he
probably
would if he
would.
could. If he was not locked away, he absolutely would.
Yeah, and people probably would flock to him again.
Yes.
Yeah. So, anyways, charismatic leadership, is that the topic? Not sure. But I watched this video from a guy who created a video on Instagram. This person's Instagram is B Recker, Bereckeer.
Yeah, I
If
follow
anyone.
him. I've seen some of he's like a former pastor that talks about the harms of evangelicalism.
Okay.
Oh, you didn't know that account?
No, I didn't follow it.
Oh, I had already followed that guy. Okay.
My algorithm
I
is mac
know
and cheese.
you're
You
just
know
like
this.
squirrels eating snacks.
You yes. Mini crocheted hats on hamsters.
Hmm.
That's my algorithm.
Okay.
Yeah, we've talked about this. But okay. So anyways, I only see this stuff if people forward it to me or, you know, stuff like that. So this guy posted a video about how he went to an LGBT affirming church and like what the experience was like and stuff like that. Mark Driscoll, who again has a huge platform, he posted a response video to that and he had a microphone in front of me. I'm like, take his microphone away. I hate that Mark Driscoll has a platform. But, anyways, so his basic response to this guy's video was, you and your girlfriend are going to hell. That message is not the Bible. That's
Not
not
the
the
real
gospel.
gospel.
Yeah, yeah, not the real gospel. Mark Driscoll is known for misogynistic messages. He's known for very fundamentalist, absolutist conclusions on stuff. No flexibility whatsoever or anything like that. So in this guy's video, he's like, yeah, Mark Driscoll just told me that I'm going to hell. And you would think that that would be a fringe behavior to tell someone that, but this is something that's very normal and very common in a fundamentalist context where it's all based upon certainty. It's all based upon this group versus this group, the yeses and the nos. Like there's no flexibility, there's no in between. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm not surprised that Mark Driscoll said that about him, but tell everyone what you told me in response
Okay, I
to
texted
that.
Elisa the sentence that said, and I texted it to her ironically, as you can imagine. I'm trying to pull it up because I'll say it
You're like,
wrong.
I texted it ironically because I don't even believe in any of that.
Well, that's true though. I said, you know, they say that Satan takes something that looks a lot like truth and he changes it just a little bit. Be careful out there.
Yeah. So, okay, Mark Driscoll would agree with that statement because he would say, all right, these people in these affirming churches are using vocabulary about acceptance and um, God's inclusiveness and, Jesus loves the little children. He would say that they are abusing those teachings and that vocabulary to turn this message around. Like being gay is bad, and they're using Christian language to make it seem good. That's Mark Driscoll saying Satan is an angel of light, right?
Yes.
But you're saying the complete opposite of Mark Driscoll's messages are using so much Christianese and all this language and stuff like that, but him being how he is and not affirming and abusive and everything, that's Satan being an angel of light by covering up all of his behaviors and stuff like that with positive language or with like religiosity, basically. And his playbook works so much. Like he has so many people following him. He gets all the deals. He gets all the
Yeah.
invitations to conferences and stuff like that. And even after everything came out, he is still going on with his success.
Yeah. I I swallow that difficult pill with a giant dose of radical acceptance. And not that we can't fight against it, the injustice of it, and speak out about it, which this will be up on YouTube for the entire internet to hear, but no one will listen. But like, I think that there will always be a market for people like Mark Driscoll because it's so enticing. Fundamentalism is enticing. Our brains are wired in some ways, I think, to hear messages of certainty and to follow a leader somewhere, even if the leader is going the wrong way. Like, it just, unfortunately, it is. part of at least this era of humanity. I hope that we'll get smarter at this, but I don't know that we ever will stop
Yeah.
learning these lessons. Because it's like once you learn the lesson personally, you're like less inclined. But someone behind you who's naive or hasn't learned that lesson is like, oh yeah, Mark Driscoll's great.
Yeah.
It's always a fresh crop of people.
Yeah. And unfortunately, like nowadays, it's like the white college-aged young men that are
Hmm.
really getting back into fundamentalism, despite what their parents' experience was, or despite like how their parents raised them and stuff like that. There's this like big turnaround in that population specifically of people who are really buying into these fundamentalist, misogynistic messages, which makes sense because they benefit from them the most.
Of course, if you're going to be a king in your house and have people serve you and you're the one that can go to leadership and you can have the church passed down to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And
very enticing.
here are the women. Pick one.
Yeah. And they will serve you and submit to you and honor you all of their days.
Yeah.
A great deal.
Yeah. Ask our husbands what a great deal they got.
There's a comedian who I just rewatched this reel and I laughed and laughed over again. And she was saying like how much she wants a wife. Like she's like, "Do you know how great my life would be if I had a wife and like had someone to like care for me and like take care of my appointments and cook for me?" She'd like, I would be crushing it at work if I had a wife
Yeah.
at home."
I equate that to like Rosie from the Jetsons. Like you have
Hmm.
like this robot that does stuff for you.
Those sound great.
Yeah. That's like us, the husbands and then us being on tier two. Who's on tier three? Like it would have to be a robot.
And I think that that's the tricky part about like feminism right now is that they're like, well, F this. Am I allowed to say F this on this podcast?
F this to our parents, who are the only ones listening.
Sorry, Dad. That the problem is that like when you as a wife say, I'm done with submitting to you, I'm not going to cook the meals, I'm not going to make the appointments, we have to do this equally. And like it's just really bumpy to get that done and it's hard to accomplish. Like if you can stop doing the job, but there is no Rosie to do it for you.
Hmm.
It's not
Yeah.
like your husband's going to become a stay-at-home husband to do it all. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes, yeah, and that's great. But anyway, it's just really messy to figure all of that out.
Yeah. You end up at a stalemate and a really messy house that you have to then
Yes,
use the whole weekend to get it back in shape because you
it's
stopped
very
doing
tough.
stuff. Yeah. But okay, so anyways, I think like the age-old questions of humanity, what happens after we die? Where did I come from? What's my purpose? Stuff like that that religion tends to offer answers for.
Yes.
Those questions create a lot of uncertainty, things that we can't imagine, things we definitely haven't experienced, and, searching for these answers. And you only turn up with more questions. So, having a charismatic leader who is all about certainty and who has the confidence to give these messages in a way that's so dogmatic to where it's like, this is the answer. It says it in black and white. So follow that. It takes away your like waffling and having to figure stuff out on your own. And so I think a lot of people are drawn to that type of leadership that provides the confidence and that provides a clear way forward.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So me being like, we don't know, and sitting with the uncertainty, that kind of creates some more anxiety for people. And that approach isn't as, um, it's not as appealing to a lot of people because it ends up creating a lot more uncertainty. So when I was a kid and I had these questions, the questions from humanity or questions about the rapture, whatever it was, those were also rooted in fear. But I would ask my parents, you know, um, what happens after we die? And they would have the typical answer, but they would say, but I don't know. You'll have to ask Jesus when you get there. Right. As a kid, that was so unsettling. I was like, that's not helpful. That is not a helpful answer. That's telling me what happens after we die. Not sure. But if you get to where Jesus is, then you'll have to ask him and like, blah, blah, blah. Or like, how did God actually create the earth in 6 days? I don't know. You'll have to ask him when you get there. That's not giving me a scientific answer. So when you have someone that can provide these black and white answers with an air of confidence and certainty and like a blessing, like don't worry about the future because this is what's headed towards you and prosperity gospel type of stuff. Of course, people are drawn to that more than a message of not sure, you know?
And what does that do to you, knowing that that's how some people are?
That people are drawn to that.
Yes.
I want to tell people that anxiety will not kill you. Like you can sit with your emotions and you can sit with the uncertainty of things and you can sit with the not knowing, and it's not going to kill you to do that. I think people are so quick to try to turn off the anxiety or try to reason it away, spiritually bypass it, to where we're really cut off from our emotions or we're really cut off from things that cause discomfort. It's like, it's just like a pill, but in
Yeah.
the form of a sermon. Like, oh, okay, got my answer, problem solved. But
Well, it's like, I think that the benefit of the Enlightenment, we're going historical here with this answer, but like humans have benefited the human race a lot by asking questions and thinking about those big questions and finding scientific method. And like like our reasoning skills have, like wanting to know things have helped us in a lot of ways. But when it comes to the but there's a limit. Like there's a big fundamental question about when you get to religious topics and like how we got here. Like maybe we'll always keep asking that question, but the fact that we may not ever arrive in a lifetime at the answer to that is like the end of that benefit.
yeah, you can never arrive at a conclusion of whether hell exists or not until it's too late.
But isn't that fascinating? I talk to Colin about this all the time. Like, it is mind-blowing to me that we all exist and we're all doing all of this, and we actually have no way to figure out why we're doing it or how we actually got here. And like we can guess and you can go religion or science, but like you're saying about how like none of us can actually prove it one way or another unless we die and get more information later. Like, it's fascinating how little we know.
Yeah.
And we're just out here, and then like I'll tell Colin, like it's just crazy to me that we're just out here like doing life in this world. Like we're like, yep, this is what we do here. We're doing life. It all makes sense. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. None of this makes any sense at all, guys. We don't even know what we're doing or why.
Yeah. And like we can't prove if we only get one life or not. There's a whole
No,
debate about that. Yeah.
there's a lot that you would have to tolerate not knowing.
Yeah. So someone with this type of leadership who's insinuating that they have all the answers and that there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it, or I can determine who's going to hell and who's not. What a delusional mindset to have, to think that you have that power or that all knowingness because you have like this tool called the Bible at your hands. And if there's another interpretation of it, that one is wrong because I have the right one. That it just sounds so unhealthy to
But it
look at it.
made a lot of sense when it was pitched to me for a lot of years.
I thought you were going to say it made a lot of money because these things tend to make a lot of money too. Okay, it made a lot of sense to you when it was pitched like that for so many years. Was
Yes.
it the certainty that was comforting to you? What was comforting in your involvement?
Yeah, I'm going to be on this podcast today as like a devil's advocate or like as a former me, the former me that believed that that was actually true because that was definitely what I felt was actually true.
Mhm,
You're saying it's delusional, but at the time, it just felt like there were so many sermons, there was so much a mound of data that people gave to me to validate their claims that
mhm,
they were right. So, like all the apologetics and all of the like we've had, the miracles and like at the time, it felt like, well, I guess this is the one true religion in the exact form, and I guess people
Hmm.
are trying to water it down. And then even like in the internal documents of the Bible,
The
there's,
Dead Sea Scrolls.
well, yes, archaeologically, which by the way, do you know that like if you really look into that, it's totally debunked, and there was Dead Sea Scrolls that they found that were totally different translations of like the Old Testament that no one talks about?
Mm.
Did you
Kind
know
of like
that?
the Q source that they can't find.
Yeah, like that. But in the dead, like when we were growing up, the Dead Sea Scrolls were a big deal because they were like, this proves that the Bible is exactly accurate and
Hmm.
preserved perfectly.
Yeah.
It said it proves that it's preserved perfectly. And they pulled like some little fragments from the New Testament and some of the Dead Sea Scrolls lined up with the ones that we had. And they were like, see, it's the same. But if you actually read the content of the archaeologists that did it, there's a lot of the Dead Sea Scrolls that proved the opposite because there was
Oh.
entire changes in books of the Old Testament
Hmm.
that the Dead Sea Scrolls prove was a different rendition.
Okay. So what do you do with that?
We were just lied
Ignore
to.
it?
Somebody just cherry picked a story that they wanted to prove their case, and if you actually look at it, it doesn't. But when you're 11, you're like, "Oh, okay, this must be true."
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Or like they come up with stuff regarding carbon dating to prove that the Earth is only 6,000 years old.
that's what's so hard is that people use science to convince you
Hmm.
that they are not delusional, that they're actually very, very intellectual about this.
Hmm.
It was the intellectualism.
So when I say delusional, what I'm referring to is that certain person that says, I have the answer and I can determine yes and no, you know?
Yeah, but I really thought that that was me.
Dang.
Wait, you're saying that I have the answer and can determine heaven and hell for people?
I'm more referring to someone like Mark Driscoll, whose messages are so black and white and whose leadership relies on the certainty that he has and is so quick to herd people around.
Yeah.
That even if someone has some questioning or something like that, it's like, well, I have the power to shape, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's a high ego dose.
Yeah. I'm talking like grandiosity. It's not only confidence, it's a really high dose of confidence that's
Yes.
resulting in this like characteristic or facade of someone that is all knowing
Yeah,
or
like
trying
almost
to emulate
godlike.
God.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I think that there's a different flavor of that for the like the quote lay people than for the like Mark Driscoll who's also in church leadership saying I'm like God over all of you too and I'm going to be your pastor and I'm going to tell you what to do because God speaks to me on your behalf.
Mhm.
Like that's a different layer of egocentrism. But what I was taught was that I was also given God's knowledge and wisdom, and it was my job to impart that to the people who were, quote, deaf and blind from, quote, Satan around me, and that I was trained to be that way.
Mhm.
So I was a mini Mark Driscoll. When I would go into my public high school, like it was my job to be Mark Driscoll to the people around me. I wasn't like my personality style wasn't his personality style, so I wouldn't have been doing that. But theologically, that was what I believe was my role. I was the
Mhm.
chosen daughter of God. Like there's so much egocentrism that goes into that belief.
Yeah.
It's quite extraordinary. But I thought I was doing the right thing. I don't
I think
think,
there's,
yeah.
go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, it's just hard because it's all wrapped up in like what you think is being good or being right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of colonialism wrapped up in it too, of like your school is your missions field,
Hmm.
kind of like going into it with that type of underlying agenda.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was never anything that occurred to me on the intellectual side that it wasn't the exact right thing to do.
We are more than conquerors.
Yeah, and you have the truth, and like God, every conversation is the mission field, and every interaction you have is your chance to save a soul. Like it was. It was just wrapped up in so much meaning making that it was very hard to. This is why it's so difficult.
That's a lot of pressure to put on a 15-year-old.
I know, right? So I was trying to look up this ad going on in my community right now because they're doing like this big Rally for America or something. I don't know what it is. It
Hmm.
says like something about like Rally for America. Okay,
Sounds
nothing.
like my crowd.
Yeah, Rally for America. And in the bottom, the scrolling line says like, do you know why we're here? Do you know what your purpose is? Come find the answers. And it's this big, like basically like revival from it's like being posted by like a First Baptist church, so I'm sure I can understand like where that's coming from. But like they have all the signs out in front of my kids' middle school. And
Oh,
so they have lots of like they look like campaign signs all around our community right now. And I'm like,
what do they say?
they say come to this rally. It's like in on a Saturday in a few weeks.
Like, find the answers.
Yeah, like find the answers to truth and the meaning of life. We have them here.
Oh,
It's like a get group, it's like a Billy Graham crusade
okay.
type of thing.
That's just so presumptuous to think that right now we have the answers to these questions that have existed for millennia.
Do you find, so I'm telling you, like, I think that's exactly how I would have felt. But when you like rewind to at least 10 years ago, would you have felt like that? Or were you always like, oh, I don't know, there's multiple ways of thinking about this?
10 years ago, I think I was on that flexible path,
Okay.
but um, maybe when I was 15 or 16, I would have been like, no, it's black and white right there. This is how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been a work in progress, but I've just found so much freedom in saying, I don't know, you
Yeah.
know, to where the pull towards certainty isn't so appetizing anymore because it doesn't leave any wiggle room or it doesn't leave any like room for cognitive dissonance of like this is what feels right, but this is what someone's saying is right. I think there's room to sit with that and to figure out what aligns with your values instead of the teaching being like, well, this is what was said and you have to obey it. So I don't find much value in that, especially with how flawed people are.
Yeah.
Again, I recommend The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill by Christianity Today if you'd care to listen.
It is a
It's,
really good, that's a good
yeah,
podcast. I
it's,
like the journalism style podcasts.
yes, yeah,
They're
it's
so
good.
interesting.
They did a really good job on that. Um, so, anyways, I think that's all I have.
Fun chat.
Yeah, just just be chill about it. Oh, here's some bonus content. So I went to this event for my daughter's school where kids could set up this like little display about any topic. Like there were some really interesting topics, like Victorian fashion. This girl dressed up in a Victorian era dress. There were stands about different types of animals, stands about how to treat type 1 diabetes. And I think the kid had type 1 diabetes and they had all their equipment out to show people. And
Cool.
yeah, there were ones about different sports. There were what life is like in Afghanistan, like, and kids dressed up how they dress in Afghanistan. It was just literally any topic. My daughter's topic was how do stars affect our life on Earth? Very Jennifer. You'd probably be interested to see her display board. But yeah, what do stars give us or whatever? Um, so I was like, all right, when I was younger, third grade, fourth grade, what would my presentation have been? And I was thinking, like, the seven churches of Revelation, or like Paul's letters, like
Really? In elementary
I
school?
don't know. I can't really think about it. I honestly think I would have set one up about Doppler radar. Like I was obsessed with the weather when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Part of it was because of fear, like fear of storms, but I was like really into what a Doppler radar can pick up and what the colors are and all that. So it could have been about the weather. It could have been, what is the gospel and why is it important? I could have seen myself making a presentation like that. And then The other option would have been gun control. Gun control and why it's bad. Because the liberals are coming for us to take away our rights.
Oh, that would
And
have been your conservative
yeah, it would have been a very
um,
conservative
First
thing.
Amendment problem.
Yes. And I know that because I wrote a letter to the editor as part of a project in school about why gun control is bad. So that might have been the topic. I'm not sure. But I'm like, what would third grade or fourth grade me have made a whole like board about?
Yeah.
Can't say. But
I love remembering what it felt like to be a third grader because everything was so like interesting and
yeah.
exciting.
Uh-huh.
Like my mom had a book from Mr. Wizard with these experiments in it, and like I love doing science
Yeah.
experiments and that
Uh-huh.
kind of stuff was great.
Yeah. Or it's just like
It's fun.
you could make a whole board about leaves.
Yes,
Just like it
it's the
could be
best.
yeah, it could be anything. So, yeah. Well, that's my little tidbit. Speaking of, feeling secure in the certainty and different topics, but yeah, that would have been good.
You can also make leaf art. I'm going to end on this. You can put a leaf on a piece of paper and then make the sun bleach it,
Yes.
and then take it
Yes.
off.
Yep.
We should
We
all be
would
required to do that as adults. It would be
we used
better.
to iron leaves in wax paper.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
So why aren't we doing that anymore? Making crystals, you like boil water and put a bunch of sugar in it and then hang a string off of a
oh right.
pencil.
Right.
That was like, I always was trying to make like a rock candy thing.
Yeah.
It never worked.
I didn't
Dang
try
it.
that one.
Oh, that was the funnest.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, stay tuned for next time.
okay, maybe we'll come back with
For
more experiments.
yeah. Goodbye.
Have a wonderful day.
Yes, you too. Enjoy this trip around the sun.
I will. Glad to be here.
All
Okay.
right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.